This is the Life Sciences Leadership Show. I'm your host, Michael Piperno, and I'm a leadership communication coach and facilitator who specializes in the life sciences industry. On each episode of this show, I interview industry leaders from organizations of all sizes about their leadership journeys. My goal for the show is to help you gain leadership insights and knowledge that'll help you in your own life sciences leadership journey. Okay, on with the show. Everyone, I'm so pleased to have Lauren Stevenson here today on the show. She is Chief Scientific Officer and co-founder, and also Head of Translational Sciences at Immunologix Laboratories. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thanks, Michael. I'm very excited to be here and really pleased that you invited me and look forward to this conversation.
I'm excited you're here too. We've had a couple great conversations over the past few months, and when you agreed to have one of those conversations on the show so everybody else could listen to it, I was really thrilled. So I'm glad you're here. Listen, why don't we get started by talking a little bit about you and your leadership journey? So can you give us just like an overview of how you got to where you are today?
Sure. It was a pretty winding journey, but why don't I start with, how does one ever get into leadership to begin with? So for me, of course, I'm a scientist. It all starts with your education. So I did my undergraduate education at Boston University. And after finishing my undergraduate, I really didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So I took some time, got myself out into the workforce. I worked in academic labs doing research at the bench. And I grew up in a time when the biotech industry was really just starting to be born and growing rapidly. So I took that opportunity, having grown up in the greater Boston area, to take a foray into industry. I was really excited at the thought about doing work that would be closer to patients. It's something I might do, may positively impact a patient in my lifetime. And so I worked at a number of small companies in the greater Boston area and really just kind of navigated my way, learning new things, discovering what different work environments were like, discovering what the different science was like. And as often happens in these cases, you hit a point where you realize, I want to do more. And to do more is going to require more education. So after several years, I did return back to school. I got my PhD at Harvard University, and I knew going into that program that industry was the place I was going back to. I really had caught that bug of wanting to be closer to the clinical science and the impact on patients. So after my PhD, I did do a foray in the UK. I did a postdoctoral session there in the UK for 4 years. Really insightful to live in another culture. And I think that shaped who I was as a person and also that ability to really see different perspectives. You might not think that American and British culture is very different, and it certainly was an easy dip in the water for going abroad, but there were great nuances that I learned there. So from there, I now, with my PhD, came back to industry. I worked at a couple of small companies and eventually landed at Biogen, where I spent the bulk of my post-PhD career before joining Immunologix. And so through this journey, of course, you're growing at the bench, you're producing data, you're doing well. Eventually, the day comes where somebody says, we have an opportunity to manage someone. Here you have, a person that can help you do your work. And I have to say, most scientists see this as, yes, another pair of hands to churn out more data, right? It's really, everybody sees it as just an opportunity to get more stuff done. But I was very fortunate that very early on, I was sent to a management training program. And I'm not going to lie, I and my other scientists were going into this room kind of rolling the eyes. Why are they making us do this soft skills stuff? Okay, fine. But thankfully, I was open-minded enough that I really paid attention and I discovered a whole new world opening up before me. I mean, almost to the point of like goosebumps on the arms at different times and realizing as a scientist, wait a minute, people are chock full of their own data. And the more that you understand how people tick, the better it is for everybody, right? And even that bottom line of getting the more stuff done. So I really caught the bug there. And then as my career progressed, discovered that that sort of passion that I had in that area gave me more and more opportunity to manage more people. And I continue to be equally excited by learning about all the people who came within my organization and then starting to understand the dynamics of how all these people fit together as a group gets larger. How can you make sure everybody's needs are being met? How can you assign projects in a way that really benefits the outcomes, but also the people who are undertaking it? And so through that, I guess I became, really enamored of leadership. And at first through the lens of just managing people in that very personal element, but then over time developing an appreciation strategically for how the better you build your organization and the more functional it is, the greater things that you can accomplish, which brings back to my initial passion of the ability to really make a difference in the lives of patients. And so the better we can do our work, the more likely we can do that.
Right. Great. Oh, I love that. I love it. Thanks for summarizing the journey there. A couple things that really hit me when you were talking is, number one, just the fact that when you were the scientist going into that leadership develop soft skills course, I get that all the time when I walk into a workshop. These people are like, what's this guy going to teach me? Come on, I've been presenting for years and I know my data and everything. And it always makes me feel so good when they leave that workshop and they were like, oh, wow. These are things I know I should be doing, but I'm not doing them at the level that I should be doing them as a leader. And that's one of the things that you and I have talked a lot about is communication. And one of the things, and I think I heard you say it a little bit in what you were saying, but one of the things, the challenges I always have with a lot of life sciences leaders is they want the data to speak for itself. They're so into the data, they've worked with it for so long, they're passionate about it, but they aren't always audience-centric enough when they deliver the data to help the people on the other end, especially if they're non-scientific folks, but to help people on the other end understand the story the data's telling. And what they need to hear in the moment is not always all the information that you have, because it's different than doing a scientific poster or writing a journal article or presenting full data to your peers. Very often you need to help others understand what you see in the data, right?
That hits home very hard. I probably have spent the most amount of time when I'm coaching my more junior scientists and even my rising mid-level managers exactly on that. As you grow through your scientific career, if you're inside a larger organization, you frequently have to go to cross-functional stakeholders and get their buy-in for things. And if you go too deep and too technical, you will lose your audience. And you really need to tune in. What does this audience need to understand? What do they care about? What are their anxieties or concerns that may be different from mine or the actual scientific details, right? I mean, they're often worried about, well, that's great science, but can you actually execute that in the context of a clinical trial? Please just talk to me about things that we can actually get done. And with younger scientists, and to your point that all that technical detail, I think the number one coaching advice I give is take 90% of what you have on that slide off that slide, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody wants to look at 6 panels of graphs and tables. It's like, what if people can remember one thing from this slide, what is that one thing? Make that your title and show the one picture that helps you drive that point home.
Absolutely. I always tell people, if people have to sit there and do sense making and they have to be like, what is this? What am I looking at? Let me figure this out. You've already lost them because they're not listening to you.
That's exactly what I was going to say. They're inside their head having an internal dialogue. They're not hearing a word you say.
Right. And everybody out there, no complete sentences on slides. They should be phrases. They shouldn't be complete sentences, because if your script is on your slide, it's a teleprompter. It's not a slide anymore. So, yeah, I mean, it amazes me how much of that we see in the world that we live in. But I get it. We're all moving fast, and we want to make sure we don't leave anything out. A lot of times I'm challenged, Lauren, by, well, the deck has to stand on its own when I'm not there to present it. Well, fine. Have a version of the deck for that. But that's not the one you use as a visual aid, because if you're asking your people to read and listen, you're not going to be able to land your point. You're not going to be able to achieve your goal, whether it's educate, persuade, whatever that goal is. So, yeah. So one of the other things I wanted to, you mentioned younger scientists, and you and I have had some conversations about career paths and how, you got to where you are and how I got to where I am. And both of our paths we have in common are not what you would typically necessarily think is the path that you would plot out on paper when you do that. I mean, I was a high school teacher, then I was a marketing manager, then I was a creative director, then I was an agency leader, I was an adjunct professor. But it looks like, when you look at my experience, it looks like a pinball machine of like all these different things. But there is absolutely a theme line, and there's a passion that runs through that. And that is that I've always been a teacher and lover of good communication. And I personally believe, like you care about getting therapies to patients and having patients get better and live longer. I have a passion for helping people who are already probably smarter and more talented than me, but be better versions of themselves through communication. And that's presentation, but that's also communicating with people. Communication to me is, let me test this out on you. I really think, I don't have the data on this, but I really think good leadership is almost at least half of how you make people feel in the moment, and how you listen, and how it is the soft skills that, to be honest with you, a lot of people find very difficult. So anyway, that's my riff on communication and soft skills. But from a career journey standpoint, like, is there a typical career path to the CSO? I mean, do you get asked that question?
I don't know if there's a typical career path to a CSO. I would say if there is, I did not take it. I would need to survey other CSOs. There surely are a subset of folks who took what would be viewed as perhaps a more linear path. I think what people find most interesting when they approach me, and going back to where you started with the young scientists, yes, I do have very excited young scientists with great ambitions who come to me and say, tell me how to get there. And the first thing I say to them is, why do you want to be a CSO? Do you know what the job is? And why do you think you want it? Because truth be told, never did I ever in my career and on my journey say, I want to be a CSO.
Interesting.
So how on earth did I land here?
Right.
And I honestly think that being a CSO, if you're going to do it really well in our space, I think it does require that you spend the time in your career absorbing different environments, different points of view, learning about yourself deeply and being deeply honest with yourself, what your real skill set is versus what it's not. You mentioned communication. That's critical. How can you lead the scientific strategy of an organization if you cannot clearly frame out what we're doing, why we're doing it, and get a whole organization of people to move in the same direction with you? You can't do that without strong communication skills. And you can't communicate that well if you haven't trained yourself to understand those people. You can't step in and say, well, here's the vision I have, and now you're all going to do it. Right? You have to tell stories. You have to explain why we all care about this and why the way that you've laid it out is a viable way to get there, and hopefully an enjoyable way to get there and rewarding for the people who are putting the work in. And you also equally need to say, I'm laying this out, but I am taking your feedback and I will course correct. So you have to have those check-ins. You need to gut check, make sure that the people who are impacted by your plans, who are actually being asked to execute this, know that they have a voice, that you are going to take that feedback, and that you are going to iterate your plans appropriately. The other side of that coin, though, is sometimes you will get feedback that you are not going to change your plan for. So you equally need to be good at going back and making sure, hey, folks, I heard you. I do understand your point. But I actually need to communicate better with you now about why we still need to stay this course. And oftentimes there's a business driver. There's something at a level that, the boots on the ground are not in a position to see, but it is on the leader to be that facilitator of the information, receiving it from below and filtering it down again in a bi-directional discourse that helps everybody understand where we're going, buy into where we're going and doing it.
Yes, and I see that a lot, especially in my smaller clients, that the why often doesn't get communicated down, and then people feel like there's a lack of transparency and all of that. So yeah, I love that you said that, because it's you want people to feel that they can be heard, that you want it to be safe so that they can express their ideas and express their opinions. But you also, as a leader, sometimes need to just explain why that course, that direction or that course can't continue, because this is what we're seeing, and here's the business reason that we have to do that. When people get that, they may not agree, but at least they feel that what they said mattered.
Absolutely. And I find certainly in the scientific field, you have a lot of bright people. They have a lot of great ideas. They get very excited by the science. And you can imagine there are many opportunities where people see lots of things we could do, right? But there's a big difference between what we could do and what we should do, right? So helping them understand it isn't that what they're proposing isn't interesting. It's not that it doesn't have intrinsic intellectual value or would provide a scientific insight to someone. But when you're leading a business, you always need to think about, we have limited resources. How do we best deploy those resources for the maximum return on investment in a multiple of ways? Of course, yes, the company wants to make money, but honestly, what I'm usually thinking about is additionally, every single thing that we undertake, how is it helping the most people in our organization learn and grow and acquire skill sets? How is it helping our clients progress their programs in the most efficient, rational way that also understands the practicalities of the environment that they're in, organizationally and politically, as well as the environment of the studies that they're trying to conduct? All of these things need to come into play as you make decisions about where you invest your resources and your funds.
Yeah. Yeah, because the person who's sitting there thinking this data could be better if I could just do more may not have the perspective of, well, the time to do more, we don't have the cash to get there. So a decision needs to be made. Sometimes it's as simple as that. But if those conversations aren't happening, then people may get defensive on, well, why isn't well, I know this can be better. This is not the best work I can do, but it's the best work we can do as a company for right now. And we have enough to make a decision.
Yes.
So I want to get back to skill set, because you talked about how it's important to be self-aware about your skill set, and it is very important. And I would add to that not only your skill set, but like what lights you up. What are the things that really light your passion, fuel your purpose, and all of that. And I feel like the best leaders, whether they're at the top or they're just a leader in general, are the ones who are able to leverage their strengths. And you and I've talked a lot about strengths because we both do some strengths coaching, but leverage their strengths, but also show their people what matters to them, and have their people really feel that that they've set that vision, that they have that conviction, that they have that belief in what we're doing and why it matters and all of that. So it's like that really great combo, your core values, your strengths, and then how you show up and how you make people feel is kind of like the modern day leadership presence, which I'm so glad it's not just, stoic speeches with good eye contact and well-worded scripts. It's about much more than that. It's about much more. But let's talk a little bit about strengths, because I know from my work with strengths coaching, when you're able to help team members really understand their strengths, number one, and when you're able to let them use them and be seen for using them and be shown that those strengths that they use matter, it can be really transformational. So talk a little bit about your experience with coaching folks on strengths.
I think where I'll start is where I first really discovered a strengths tool myself. So, we come at strengths from different ways, but the fundamentals are all the same. And it was 2014, the first time where my employer actually deployed this StrengthsFinder assessment to all of us. And you know how these things go. We've all done all these assessments, and you go to the facilitated session, everybody's really energized for a day, and then everybody goes back and puts their head down and keeps working, and it kind of goes in a drawer. But for whatever reason, this really tuning into strengths just hit me in a way that no other assessment did. And I think the critical parts were, the tool that we used was really geared towards improving performance at work, using your natural skills and applying it in the work environment. So it's not like a personality test, right? It's not like, oh, understand me better. It's who am I and how can I be my best effective self at work? I really loved that. The other piece was that as I had worked my way through managing teams, one of the things that felt viscerally true to me was against the old school of management, which is I'm going to be really comfortable telling you what you're bad at, and we're going to focus on what you're bad at. And we're going to try to remediate you, and I'm going to send you to classes, and I'm going to, all the things to get you better at the things that you're bad at. And we would talk very little about what people were great at, or it would be like, well, you're already great at that. We don't need to worry about it. Let's talk about where you need to improve. And that always hung uncomfortably for me. We all know if you're not naturally gifted at something, you can become competent, but you're going to spend a lot of time and effort. And you will hear me use the term again, ROI. I am all about return on investment. And so this kind of lit me on fire. I was like, okay, it's not just my gut telling me it makes a lot more sense to lean into what people already do well, but there's a whole school of data behind this, that this is how you actually get high performing teams. So I ran with it, and I was so enthusiastic about it that I got permission to have my entire team take it, because you know how these organizations can be, they offer a lot of things to managers and leaders that they don't then offer to the rest of the organization, which is strange, because where are you going to get your future managers and leaders from? So I deployed it to my entire team, had lots of conversations about it. Everybody had greater insights about themselves, but also about their coworkers. And then I papered my office with everybody's top 5 strengths. And with that visual in front of me, every time someone walked into my office and would start talking about a problem or an issue or something that went great, I could see their strengths, and then I would scan my eyes across and be like, who would be really helpful in this scenario would be this person, because I think that natural talent they have would lend great insight here. And so the powerful partnerships that formed were really incredible. And then that started to feed, how do we even parse out assignments, right? And then what you end up having is when people are working inside their strengths, they naturally take things to the next level.
Right.
They naturally just start opening doors for themselves and seeing possibilities. They also are naturally energized. So I think and I can't even tell you where I'm pulling this out of. Maybe I'm making it up, but like an 80-20 split. If you spend 80% of your time at work doing things that are kind of in your zone and energizing you, that gives you the energy to kind of do the 20% that may, drain your energy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because we all have that 20%.
Absolutely.
But I agree with you. If you're more motivated and more feeling like you're doing things that you're good at and that you're able to accomplish and make a difference with, then those other tasks are much easier to take on.
Yeah, you have the energy for it. And then sometimes you'll talk to people though, and maybe they're struggling a little bit in their role. Maybe they've changed roles. And there are a couple of ways you can approach it. You can help them understand, like, well, what are your strengths and how might you apply them in this scenario? Might
Right.
look different from the person who's training you how to do that job, right? So that's an opportunity, and sometimes that works out well. But sometimes people just really get stuck and they're drained, they're exhausted. And that's when I usually ask them to reflect and say, can you think back to what we call peak work experiences? When you think of those moments where you were firing all cylinders, you're super excited, you feel so energized, and to help them reflect on past experiences of that. Is there a commonality there? And can they find any elements where that would fit in their current role to infuse some energy in their current role? Or sometimes it leads to a realization that they say, you know what, I'm never going to get to an 80-20 here in this role, because a lot of what this role requires is always going to be draining for me. And then we start talking about what's a better next role for you. It doesn't mean you can't be perfectly competent at it. You absolutely can, but we all want to get up and come to work and be energized by what we're doing, not beaten down and exhausted by it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I use Clifton Strengths is a great assessment. I use the Strength Deployment Inventory, SDI, which is it's a little bit of a different philosophy than Clifton Strengths, but a lot of it is the same. It's like you have your top strengths that you use at work that you get results with. And then you have the strengths that are kind of toward the bottom of your strengths pool, the ones that you don't naturally think to use, but that you can still use, but you have to be motivated to use them.
Yes.
And if you're not motivated to use them, someone just saying to you on your performance review, I need you to be more persuasive, I need you to be more analytical, without helping them link to the part of them that would actually motivate them to do that, they're not going to do it. So, yeah, I love working with people on the strength stuff because it also helps people have more confidence and power in their superpowers when they're able to name them and they're able to sit and they're able to see that other people see that they get results for them. That's very empowering.
Absolutely. And I have found, and when I say then you have people who are able to take it to the next level, it's because when you really understand these fundamentals, these underlying fundamental aspects of who you are, you can be presented with a brand new situation or opportunity that if you didn't have that understanding of yourself, you might say, oh my God, I've never done that before. I don't know. I'm anxious. I don't even know how to start. Why would you think I should do that? But when you can reflect back and say, I understand these fundamental talents that I have many examples in the past of how I use them, and I can see how these could be applied to this brand new situation. And so I found it really helps people step in, up and into bigger and broader things than they may have had the confidence to do without that understanding.
Yeah. I want to pivot over to something you and I talked about because it's kind of related in like having people be seen for their work and for their strengths and all of that. Last time you and I just had one of our personal discussions, we were talking about how important it is, especially in the world we play in, that, and we talked earlier today about the data doesn't always speak for itself. But a lot of times when I coach people, and I know this has been something that you've been really, really good at making sure, or something you've learned, or something you're good at really making sure is making sure people realize that their work doesn't speak for itself. They need to do the work to make sure that the right people know the impact and the value of what they're bringing to the table. So when was your aha moment with that? Or was that just something you've always knew as part of your leadership journey?
Oh, I 100% did not know that. I very, very much learned that the hardest way. So the story that I tell people, and I think this is important on many levels because I don't think we talk enough about the mistakes that we made or the lessons that we learned the hard way. I think people like to portray themselves as, I've always been a fully realized human who doesn't make mistakes. Actually, I can't help but bring this up right now. I was at a scientific conference just in the last couple of weeks, and one of my good friends and colleagues was giving a keynote. And in the middle of her keynote, which was very much focused on lessons learned and mistakes they made, she said, and I'm going to not quote it right, but you'll get the gist of it. She said, if you don't think you've made any mistakes, then you are not qualified for the job because you're not capable of self-reflection.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
What a fantastic quote. Jolene White, thank you very much for that quote. And that is so true. But I think still we hesitate to talk about it. So I am happy to talk about it here because my story was very much a case of where the thing that I thought was my greatest success as a leader to date, I later realized very much became my greatest failure as a leader. And I needed to fix it. So the reason I thought I had my greatest success is I was in a scenario where my organization had undergone a significant downsizing that especially impacted our department. And that happened to be the same time that I was given leadership of this organization. And I was given leadership with 1/3 the resources that we used to have, but no change in the deliverables. So the powerful piece there was obviously all my stakeholders and my management understood I couldn't accomplish that the way things had always been done. Right. So it was a huge opportunity to say, okay, clean slate, what can we change? How can we get this work done in a different way? It empowered me to be able to say no to some cross-functional
Mm-hmm.
partners because we really had to focus on priorities. It enabled me to deeply deploy the strengths approach and make sure I was maximizing my resources. And lo and behold, months pass, the team is highly engaged, we're getting all this work done. And what is the reward for that? More work with no more resources, right? And
Yeah.
then the day came and we kept absorbing it. And I will say, complete naivete. I've always been the work will speak for itself. I've
Mm.
always cringed when I've been in situations where I feel like people are tooting their own horns. Very uncomfortable for me, not how I am personally wired.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't ever want to be seen as that person. But suddenly I found myself coming to work with less and less enthusiasm. And I was
Mm.
seeing my team, although they were deeply engaged in their work, getting tired, right? Getting tired. And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, we are killing ourselves. We are hitting it out of the park, and we're doing it in so well. It's not creating ripples and waves and drama within the organization. Therefore, the organization is assuming, oh, we were over-resourced to begin with. You haven't done
Yeah.
anything great here. Your people aren't superstars. It's just we right-sized you, and
Wow.
nothing is really important going on here. And so that's when I realized I was completely failing my team. These people, down to a person, were hitting it out of the park. They
Yeah.
were committed to their work. They were doing crazy high quality work. They were working extra hours. And I was enabling that, and they were not being seen for the amazing feat that they were
Mm-hmm.
accomplishing. So I took a deep breath and I leaned deeply into my discomfort and said, you need to figure out how to advertise, celebrate, be really loud with a megaphone about exactly what your team is doing and why it's important. And so from that moment on, my senior management started getting regular emails from me. They were very dry and crisp. It was just thought you should be aware, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. This is what was done. This was the impact. I built a spreadsheet that tracked 100% of the projects and deliverables that my team was working on with timelines that I could just update and hand to my VP on
Mm-hmm.
a regular basis. I started 100% of my one-on-ones with my VP with, let me just update you on what the team has accomplished since we last sat down. No fanfare, but just relentless providing of the facts, right? Not overinflating anything, providing the facts. And understanding too, these people, they don't have the time or necessarily even the scientific background because as you go up the ladder, right, you're going to have a number of organizations reporting to you that are going to be diverse and outside your personal expertise. They had no way to know what the team was really doing if I didn't tell them. So I became a much better communicator up the way. I became much better at making sure that our key stakeholders knew how the team was contributing and that even sometimes something would happen on a given day and somebody went an extra mile. I got very good at just sending that email off to that leader and say, hey, in this month's newsletter that goes out, you might want to highlight this person for this thing.
Perfect. Yeah.
That being said, every time I wrote one of these emails, I still had to take a deep breath and I would kind of like cringe when I would hit send, still deeply uncomfortable,
Right.
but that's, again, another leadership lesson. It is in fact your job to do whatever it is that needs to be done, whether, find it easy or not.
That's right. That's right. Oh, Lauren, thanks for sharing. I love it when people come on this show and share about a failure and the lessons that they learned and how they got better and grew because we're all learning and growing. No matter where you are in your leadership journey, you're still learning and growing. And what I especially love about that is, I mean, let me ask you, when you started to do those updates and make sure that your team's achievements were visible, did people feel better at work?
Well, guess what? We got more resources.
There you go.
We did. We got a lot more resources. And the other thing, as cringy as it was for me to hit send, I'm not joking. 100% of the time, I got positive feedback from those leaders above me. They were so appreciative because now they were deeply informed about great things that were happening in their organization.
Right.
So when they were in their higher level meetings and they needed to make a case for resources, or they needed to make sure their organization, their broader organization, was appreciated, they had this like beautiful summarized data set, right?
Yeah.
They had their cliff notes.
Yeah.
So it was incredibly helpful to them as well. And that really helped me build the momentum and become as comfortable as I will ever be with doing that.
Yeah.
Because 100% of the time, positively reinforced.
You see the value in it. You feel the value. You did it for your people, and then you had another wonderful effect by enabling them.
Yep.
So that's awesome. That's terrific. So, well, Lauren, listen, we covered a lot today on this show. We talked about strengths. We talked about communication. We talked about data and not speaking for itself. We talked about the path to the CSO. We talked about different career journeys. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show today. I think that our listeners are going to find a lot of value in what they heard from us today. So thanks so much.
Oh, I'm so glad. And I had a great time. It's really fun. You know, we can talk about these things forever. So it's fabulous if it's valuable for others too.
Awesome. Lauren, I look forward to our next chat. Thanks again.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for listening to the show today. If you enjoyed it, please rate it on your favorite podcast platform and tell one colleague or friend about it. Thanks. We'll see you next time. The Life Sciences Leadership Show is brought to you by the Comvia Group, experts in leadership communication coaching and training for life sciences leaders. Learn more at www.wearecomvia.com. That's WEARE, Comvia, COMVIA.com.